and I welcome you to historic Washington Square Park, which I don't know if it's verifiable, but I would call the most intensively used park in the world, in all senses of the word. And it's a park to many historic layers, from the Lenape at Saponican Village in the vicinity of this where we stand today, to Manuel Groot and Manuel Trumpeter, who were free blacks in the 17th century who were given land grants and farmed not far from here. To the late 19th century, when the burgeoning merchant class moved northward and built those lovely row houses that still are along the north side of this park. To the Bohemians of early 20th century, and to the beatniks of the mid-century and beyond. It's many layers, and today we celebrate one of those layers, and one remarkable instance where we have evidence, physical evidence of the layer behind me, displayed for the first time this morning for all of you and then the general public, the headstone of James Jackson. 224 years ago he died on this day. We will hear much about him and the relationship of his life to the broader community during this morning's festivities. He being an Irish immigrant, and we have a strong Irish contingent here, those from representing County Kildare, the Irish government, and others from the broader New York City community of Irish descent, music is definitely in order, and I'd like to now introduce Gwen Donahue to the podium. Gwen and I, full disclosure, are friends. We've sung together once a song called With So Little to Be Sure Of, and I'm sure you'll love to hear from Gwen. So Gwen, please.
Watching all my relations, that's good morning to you all. I believe what the native people of this land believe, that we are all related. So that means the people who are buried here, they are all our ancestors. And blessings to James Jackson and his stone for bringing us all together today to honor the regular New Yorkers, displaced immigrants who built this country. His headstone says it, it's not just Farnahead, man of Ireland, it's native of Kildare. He was talking of home. Everyone here, the immigrants, dreamed of home, always. And when I was a kid in the Bronx, I heard a song about immigration called Clare to Here. But as a child, I misheard it, of course. I thought it was saying it's a long way from there to here. I thought it was for every immigrant, and I thought it was for all the parents and grandparents of kids I knew in PS 33. So I'm going to sing it that way, and I'm sure the songwriter, McTeer, will not mind that I change a word. But because this was a potter's field, I'm going to start with a keen, because I'm sure no one did that here in 1799. There's four who share this room, and we work hard for the crack. Some days sleeping late, I never get to miss. It's a long way from there to here. Friday comes along and Terry's only into fighting. Ma would like a letter home, but I'm too tired for writing. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long, long way. It gets further by the day. It's a long way from there to here. Oh, it breaks my heart when I think of Josephine. I told her I'd be coming home with my pockets full of green. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long, long way. It gets further by the day. It's a long way from there to here. The only time I feel alright when I'm into drinking, it sorta eases the pain and levels out my thinking. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long, long way. It gets further by the day. It's a long way from there to here. Do I hear a fiddle play? Or maybe it's just a notion. I dream I see white horses dance upon that distant ocean. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long, long way. It gets further by the day. It's a long way from there to here. It's a long way from there to here.
Thank you, Gwen. That was beautiful. Our first speaker has oversight over a vast and diverse territory. He does it with compassion, with commitment, thoughtfulness, and diplomacy. Please welcome Manhattan Borough Parks Commissioner Anthony Perez.
How are we doing, everyone? Happy Friday. It's my favorite day of the week. We have some great weather today, so someone's on our side up there, and I appreciate that. You know, we're expecting some torrential rain later this weekend, so we're very lucky to have this right here. And I feel like it just got brighter as I said that. Listen, folks, as I said, I'm Anthony Perez. I'm the Manhattan Borough Commissioner of New York City Parks. I've now been in this role for a year now, actually. Just last week, September 16th, was my first full year in this role. And it's really been the privilege of a lifetime to be able to be part of the stewardship of our public spaces in New York City. You know, I mentioned from time and time again that, you know, the silver lining of the pandemic was that people really realized the value of our public spaces. Particularly those of us who are New Yorkers who are cramped up in small apartments with 4 or 5 people in small bedrooms and small windows. We need these public spaces to come out and just take a deep breath of fresh air, to be able to relax, to drink coffee, and to meet up with friends and engage with folks. You know, and that shows you how everyone finds a different purpose in our public spaces, and our public spaces not only mean something different to different people, but their purpose changes over time. Over 200 years ago, we were standing over Potter's Field, and now we have this beautiful public iconic park that's such an important gem to our community. Over 200 years ago, we had folks like this gentleman's tomb behind us who passed away from yellow fever, and 200 years later, now we're dealing with COVID. You know, it's interesting to make the connection between spaces and time, and to not get too scientific in the quantum physics. But when you connect spaces and time, it really creates an arc that brings us all together, that brings us back to history in different ways, how public spaces can mean something different to humans, how it changes our behavior, it changes our interaction, not only with our families and our neighbors, but also with our community. And that reminds me as well that there's a really beautiful connection too about what that means to our purpose. You know, it almost brings to a bit of an existential conversation as to what's our real purpose here, what's going to happen to this space, what will be here in 200 years, we don't know. And now we have a connection to our past here that we can commemorate with this tombstone, to be able to connect to our past but also think about the future, to say what do we think about our public spaces and what do they mean to New Yorkers, what are our values, how can we build the future of this community in the physical testament that we have below us, that we stand upon, and we can display here. You know, and these things kind of also make you wonder, what's going to be our legacy here? Not just as individuals, but even as a parks department, as a city, as a conservancies, associations, or groups that are part of this community. You know, what are the things that we want to see in the future of this space? Do we want to create more space for more recreation? Do we want to eventually see what builds in later on? And I think that makes you wonder, what legacy will we leave behind? You know, one of my favorite lines from the play Hamilton is, what is a legacy? And a legacy is planting seeds in a garden that you'll never get to see. You know, and that also reminds me of Sigmund Freud, actually, one of his essays on transience. It reminds you of the ephemeral nature of these spaces, that they're only alive for as much as you give them in the time that you're here. And that means something different to different people. So I think that's a beautiful moment that we get to share here now. To not only think about what that means for the history of this space, but also what that means to us now today, and what that will eventually mean for the future of the city. So I think it's an important aspect of perspective to have about, again, the arc that connects time and space and people throughout history. And before I step away, I do want to make sure that I give some special welcomes and a few thank yous. I want to acknowledge Helena Nolan, the Consul General of the Irish Consulate. There you are. Sarah Carroll, the Chair of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We also have Bob Tierney, the former chair. We have somebody who's near and dear to me, the former Manhattan Borough Commissioner, Bill Castro, who's been such a great friend and mentor. Thank you for always being there for me and being there for us. We appreciate you so much. I want to acknowledge Tevin Williams from Congressman Dan Goldman's team. We had a great time earlier this week at the High Line. Keep your eye on this guy. He's got a bright future. I want to thank, of course, our partners at the Washington Square Park Conservancy. We have Betsy Eli, Veronica Mugari, who are here. There you are. How are you? We have Gwen Evans and Quentin Farrer and Douglas Evans as well. I want to thank our friends from the Washington Square Association. We have Judy Paul and Maria Pasanante Durr. And I'm not sure if they're here, but Joan Rosenstock and Trevor Sumner, they haven't made it here yet. We want to acknowledge them as well. I also want to acknowledge George Volanicus, who's over there in the back, and for his years of commitment to this park and the space and the renovation of what this park looks like today. Thank you. And of course, there's a couple more thank yous I want to mention as well before I step away. To BKSK Architects for their pro bono support of this project. To Linda Ross Glass Studios for the beautiful glass space that holds the tombstone as well. To Mr. Wee Studios for the custom metal frame that's attached here as well. To Jonathan Kuhn, who you just heard from, and his staff from the Parks and Antiquities team, what they do to really connect our public spaces and the history and the value is really phenomenal. So thank you for the work that you and your team do. And last but not least, I have to thank our park administrator, Will Morrison. Will, what you've done in such a short time is really remarkable. The leadership, the passion, the commitment that you bring to the space, to the Parks Department, is compared to none other. And I really want to thank you publicly for everything you've done and continue to do. There's another person who's got a very bright future, not in just parks, but in this city. So thank you for that. You've heard enough from me. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a wonderful weekend and stay dry.
Thank you, Commissioner. As representative of the Emerald Empire, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the representative of the Emerald Isle, Consul General of Ireland, Helena Nolan.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you, Anthony, Commissioner, for that very warm welcome. Yes, my name is Helena Nolan. I'm the Consul General of Ireland here. I'm honoured to have this role, and it's a particular privilege to be here with you all on this beautiful morning. My husband Sammy is here as well. He's our amateur photographer for the occasion. It's fantastic to see such a lovely group of people gathered together. I know that a project like this, undertaken with such honour and respect, really takes a village, really takes a city to make it happen. Many of you are here today. You're going to hear from them after me, but I'd like to thank them all in advance for the care and attention and great dignity that they have brought to this particular project. It is an historic day. We're marking the anniversary of James Jackson's death today with this event. And in honour of that, I want to acknowledge that the Kildare and Carlow Association both have senior representatives here, and that they've brought not just a beautiful wreath, but also the St. Bridget's Cross. So we have a little part of the Curragh of Kildare here today to honour its citizen. And really, there are two things happening here today. So obviously we're focused on James the individual, and I should say that my own grandfather hailed from Carlow, and he was called James, and my brother is also called James, and he lives in Carlow. So I love that point earlier about the fact that we are all related, because for sure we are. And everywhere I go in this beautiful city, I meet people who are proud of their Irish heritage or their affinity with Ireland, and that's a great honour for us to know, and we never take it for granted. James, as you know, was 28. We see here that he was a watchman I think for all of us, he can be our watchman. And there's something in that then that I'd like to say that, you know, he's also has a representative role. So when we think of him today as James the person, we should also think of him in a way as a symbol, a metaphor, a representative in a way for all who came here, all who lived, all who died here, and all who continue to come and make their lives here. His story it's a complicated one, and it demonstrates that our shared history, the history of Ireland in this city, in this country, it's even older, more fascinating, more diverse, more complex than many imagine. So we have an opportunity here today to share that earlier narrative of our history, when almost 20% of the population here came from Ireland. I hope today's event will allow others to learn more about that shared history and about that period in time. There's many historians and experts, academics, archaeologists here today. I think you will all know that we remember and we commemorate our history for the sake of the present and for the sake of the future, especially for the sake of the future and for the coming generations, so that we can continue to nourish that close relationship and that warm understanding between us, because that sense of empathy is really where all our future hope and success lies. So I want to thank everybody involved in this beautiful project for allowing us to honour here today the past, but also the present, and also our future. Thank you so much, and I'm really excited to hear from the other speakers.
Thank you, Consul General. I've been joined by Christopher Marte, Council Member of District 1 Manhattan, who you'll be hearing from in a little while, as well as Susan Kent, Chair of Community Board 2, and one of her predecessors, David Gruber, former Chair of Community Board 2, may have been when the tombstone was first unearthed, I think, if I'm not mistaken. 2 years from now will be the 60th anniversary of the Landmarks Law signed by Robert Wagner in April of 1965. And since then, I looked at the website last night. They have 37,000 properties under their guard. Quite something. It's a tough job, and somebody has to do it. So I'd like to introduce the Chair of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, Sarah Carroll.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Carroll. I'm the Chair of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and it's really a pleasure and a privilege to be with you all. Can you lift up your mic? To mark the unveiling of the James Jackson headstone. Washington Square has long been an important focal point, both for the Greenwich Village community and for the city, but it hasn't always, of course, been a park. This plot of land was once used as a potter's field, a burial ground for impoverished residents who were laid to rest without markers of any kind, which made the discovery of the intact headstone during the park renovations a bit unexpected and really wonderful, in that it provided us all with a deeper appreciation of the site's history. But then again, in New York, evidence of our city's rich and vibrant history is never that far away. It is most visible, of course, at street level, like the Greek Revival style row houses that line the park to the north. But much of our city rests beneath the ground, and a critical piece of LPC's mission is ensuring that we protect the artifacts found when we dig below to build above. And that's why when the Parks Department came to the Commission with a proposal to renovate Washington Square Park, we all agreed. It was critical to ensure a plan was in place, an approach that took into consideration the very real possibility that work might uncover significant archaeological artifacts or even burials. And so under the leadership of then Chair Robert B. Tierney, who is here with us today, the Commission and the Parks Department worked in true partnership from the start, with archaeology included across every stage of the park's renovation plan. This respectful approach to preservation is a standard practice for our partners at the Parks Department. We're always thoughtful when planning projects and work closely with LPC and our archaeology department to ensure any artifacts uncovered during work in the city's parks are protected. And it's because of their dedication that we are here today to remember James Jackson and to celebrate our shared history. So thank you again to the Parks Department for your exceptional work here in Washington Square Park, for your partnership in establishing a place of public display for the James Jackson headstone, and for your ongoing commitment to ensuring that the city's historic artifacts will continue to be preserved for the future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. Before I forget, I want to acknowledge a few people who relate to the comments you've just made. Again, Sybil Young, Preservation Officer, Architecture, Amanda Sutton with the Commission. If you were mentioned already, you need to be mentioned more than once. Amanda Sutton, who's the one archaeologist for LPC citywide. There's a lot of things going on in underfoot. And then Joan Geismar, who was the consulting archaeologist on the project, and we're so happy you could all join us today. It takes a village, as the expression goes, and on the community side, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, the dynamic and fearful protector of local landmarks and community legacy, Andrew Berman. He's been overseeing village preservation now for more than 20 years. And to those of us long in the community like myself, we still call it the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation. Please welcome Andrew.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and everybody at the Parks Department for doing this, for having the public here today. I actually want to particularly acknowledge Jonathan, who I've worked with for more than 20 years, who really is an exemplar of a dedicated civil servant, somebody who loves this city, who loves our public spaces, who loves our history, and we need that because they're fragile, our public spaces and our history, and without a lot of work, they disappear, they are paved over, they are forgotten. And so it's wonderful to gather here today because we've unearthed a little bit more of that history, and we're making sure that it is remembered and that we learn from it, because there are so many lessons for us to take from our history, good and bad. And Washington Square Park is a perfect representation of that. There is so much wonderful history here over the years in terms of culture and protest and demands for social change. But there's also the darker side of our history here as well. There were lynchings here. This was a potter's field where people who were forgotten were buried. So it's so critical that we not lose touch with what came before us, so that it continues to inform how we look ahead, how we guide what we do, how we build our city. And Washington Square Park and Greenwich Village in general are such incredibly rich resources for that. We're so blessed to have them as places that we can continue to enjoy and learn from and see living history through. So again, I just want to extend my thanks to Jonathan, the Parks Department, for all their work to make this possible. I also want to extend a special thanks to Councilmember Christopher Marte, who's just been such a tremendous advocate around these issues and a friend. And thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew has really energized the organization he's led for 2 decades. It's been around a long time, but sometimes they're on the opposite side of the city and we negotiate. But we love the fact that you're an advocate. It's a 2,000-member organization, and I'm sure he has forms where you can sign up to become a member. Continuing in the vein of it's a village, I moved to the village 38 years ago. My wife. By the way, she's written a novel. It's called Save the Village, and much of its events take place in this park. When we arrived in 1985, we used to go to the community boards for recreational sport. It was a kind of fun theatrical place to go to, and we'd see where the sausage got made and where the community input was crowdsourced. So I'd like to welcome our next speaker, the current chair of Community Board 2, Susan Kent.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. It is an honor to lead Community Board 2, which participates in preserving this park. and in preserving and ensuring the vibrancy of this park. We walk through here every day and we see all the activity and we see all the changes, and we forget just how far back our history goes. It is a sobering reminder of where we've come from. It's exciting because it reminds us that we have to keep going, and what, the future is what we make of it. It is never boring. It is always challenging, and I love to just thank you so much for coming and for caring. That's what this park needs in order to thrive, is all these people who come and they care, each in their own way, to bring whatever talents they have. And if you walk through it, you will see talent everywhere you turn. No need to repeat some of the thoughtful and knowledgeable comments that have been made. So thank you so much, and please come as often as you can.
Thank you, Susan. The city is made up, legislative body is made up of, I think, 51 districts. They keep getting rearranged and cut into slightly different patterns. And there's one called District 1, and it starts in the Battery and it goes all the way up to Washington Square. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce the current community council member for this district, Christopher Markley.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to reemphasize something. If you're not a member of Greenwich Village Historic Society, please join. They're an amazing organization. They're the reason why our neighborhood, Greenwich Village, Soho, look and feel the way they do. One thing I love about this event is that we're remembering working class people. An average New Yorker who went to work every single day as a watchman. Someone who wasn't a leader of a foreign country, someone that didn't lead a social movement, someone that didn't do an amazing discovery, someone who was just part of this community. And I think that's what's so special about this. It really gives you an idea of what happened at that time. He was probably part of the Irish immigration here that came here and decided to find a better future. All the fever, yellow fever, and epidemics of that time really changed the direction of our city. And I think that's why it's so important to always remember where we come from and the city's history. We know administration after administration, people want to develop and change where we live. Most of the time, they make excuses about the future, but they typically forget the past. And so I want to keep on emphasizing that we have to protect our parks. We have to protect our historic districts. We have to protect our landmarks. Because if not, where are we going? And who are we trying to be? And I want to end with a line that says, if you never know where you come from, you never know where you're going to go. Throughout New York City, we choose not to remember the past, but then it doesn't give us a direction in the future. And so thank you, Parks, for doing this again, giving us this tombstone to remember the people, the working people that built this city, and that will continue to make us move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. A few matters of business and a few thank yous before I introduce our last speaker. And one trivia question. First, I'd like to introduce two members of my staff. John Saunders, with the cap on and the beige outfit. He's the monuments conservator for all parks in New York. He does a great job. He was up on the lift with our interns at the Washington Square Arch this past summer, repointing the parapet. Jenny Lampsis, our deputy director. Lampsis is a Greek name, but half of her DNA is Irish. So, and you can see it in her eyes and auburn hair, and wide openness to the world. Kevin Fitzpatrick, a colleague of ours, temporarily, hopefully longer than that, who just led the COVID oral history project for the Parks Department, where he interviewed 60 people and created a bunch of podcasts that you can listen to about what happened in the more recent epidemic in New York. His heirs come from County Kildare, I'm told. I also would like to call out all those who work for and support the Washington Square Conservancy. It's very important that you contribute if you're a park user, because the city can't finance it all, and they both augment basic services, and then they program this park in great and meaningful ways. So please keep the Conservancy in mind at this time of year. The trivia question. Who else was born on this, who else departed this life on this day in history in New York? Well, there's a statue of him in City Hall Park, facing City Hall. If you walk through the metal detectors and you come out the other side in the plaza, there's a sculpture of Nathan Hale. And Nathan Hale was hung on September 22nd, 1776. So there's some interesting connections there too in terms of today's date. Just thought I'd point that out. My last speaker is really a true historian and a passionate caretaker of the history of Ireland and Irish American history in New York. Please welcome Marion Casey, who is a professor at the Glucksman Ireland House at NYU, and she's going to introduce one of her students following, who will sing again for us, and that will conclude our program. And I want to thank all of you. If we've left anybody out, my apologies, and thank you all for being here. Please, Marion.
Before I begin my formal remarks, I just want to point out that I came to NYU as a graduate student in the 1980s, and my entire professional life has been formed around this park and in this park. So I am also very grateful that it's here and that I'm able to be here with you today. When this headstone was found in 2009, it was an extraordinary intrusion of the 18th century into the 21st. It was also an enigma. Although the history of this area of New York is known, particularly the various ways in which the ground we stand on today has been used, it is much harder to make that history subjective. Who is this man with such a common name, James Jackson? We have only 5 concrete pieces of evidence. The 1799 list of yellow fever victims matches an entry in the 1798 city directory, which was published sometime before July that year. We know from that he was a watchman, precisely when the city was increasing the ranks of its police force. There was a night watch. And we have the stone, which gives us the most critical piece of information, native of the county of Kildare, Ireland. We do not know when he emigrated. However, there was only one part of County Kildare associated with Jackson's at this time. That is Davidstown in the Church of Ireland parish of Kilcullen. This means our James Jackson was Protestant. Davidstown is within walking distance of the small town of Kilcullen, where in late May 1798 there was a fierce battle. Several thousand young men, Catholic as well as Protestants, from the surrounding area rose up as part of the United Irish Rebellion. They succeeded in holding back British troops for most of a day from a height in the old graveyard at Old Kilcullen until they were eventually forced to surrender. They were granted clemency for laying down their arms. We do not know if James Jackson was one of those rebels fighting for Irish political liberty and equality from Britain just as Americans had, but it may explain why it was important to inscribe his age, 28, and his place of origin, Kildare, on this stone. There were approximately 11,000 United Irishmen in Kildare in 1798. The historian David Brundage described these as, quote, typically young, literate, and highly opinionated. He also notes that some of those chose exile over prison or death, even before the fighting ended in Ireland in the fall of 1798. Indeed, on October 13th, the New York printer Hugh Gain, a member of the city's Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, noted in his diary that, quote, too many United Irishmen have arrived in the last few days. They were welcomed by sympathetic supporters because there had been a branch of the organization in New York since the previous summer. If James Jackson was not at the Battle of Kilcullen, he may have worked for Irish nationalism from this side of the Atlantic. Joan Geisler, the archaeologist to whom we are indebted today, noted that this stone was found only 1.5 feet below the ground surface, the current ground surface, which suggests that it might have been placed there from a previous location. She also points to a new August 1799 city directive that all yellow fever victims had to be buried in Potter's Field, and we know this was in Potter's Field. And Jackson died a month later, on this day a month later. Now, in a city like New York, we all know that power and proximity go hand in hand. In 1799, when James Jackson died, the land directly opposite this park, right over there, belonged to Robert Richard Randall, the son of a man from County Limerick. He was a retired sea captain, a very generous philanthropist who founded Sailor Stud Harbor on Staten Island, if any of you know the cultural center there. And he was also a member of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick. He would have had enough political clout and wealth to bury Jackson on his estate and to erect a headstone. Again, we can't know for certain, but Captain Randall was buried there himself in June of 1801. That land on the north side of the park was held in trust for the rest of the 19th century. When the city cut 8th Street through Randall's estate in 1825, his body was moved to a vault in St. Mark's in the Bowery. Then beginning in 1831, the buildings we can now see on Washington Square North were developed, and perhaps that's when James Jackson's stone was moved into the park. There are still so many unknowns, and yet this elegant headstone reminds us of the quiet actions that derive from friendship, kinship, and empathy. Whoever arranged and paid for this tribute to James Jackson was cognizant of the ways in which the phrase native of the county of Kildare, Ireland would distinguish him from New Yorkers generally and among his fellow Irishmen in particular. He was a young man from a part of Ireland convulsed by rebellion in 1798, who died in a city ravaged by a deadly epidemic in 1799. I am so grateful to Jonathan Kuhn for never forgetting or losing this stone, and for all those who made the installation possible. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge representatives of the County Kildare Association of New York who made the journey today to be with us, and the current president, Carl Mangan, in particular. And as a tribute to all the souls who lived in Ireland and New York at the end of the 18th century, I have asked Claire Martin to conclude this ceremony with a song about that long ago past. Claire? Claire is a senior in NYU's Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development, where she is majoring in musical theater and vocal performance, and I'm particularly proud that she is also minoring in Irish Studies.
Then tell me, Sean O'Farrell, tell me why you hurry so. Hush, my boy, now hush and listen. And his eyes were all aglow. I bear orders from the captain. Get ye ready quick and soon, for the pikes must be together at the rising of the moon. Ah, then tell me, Sean O'Farrell, where the gathering is to be. In the old spot by the river, right well known to you and me. One word more, a passing signal, whistle of the marching tune, with the pike upon your shoulder at the rising of the moon. And there at that singing river, that dark mass of men were seen. Far above their shining weapons, on their own immortal green. Death to every fallen traitor, forward strike the marching tune, and hurrah, my boys, for freedom. It is the rising of the moon. How well they fought for poor old Ireland, and full bitter was their fate. Oh, what glorious pride and sorrow fill the name of 98. Yet thank God while hearts are beating, each man bears a burning one. We will follow in their footsteps at the rising of the moon.
Thank you so much, Claire, and to Miriam, and to all of you. Goodness, I can't think of a better way to end this event. There'll be opportunities to take pictures, both the principals and those here. I would point out that the window has a little bit of a mirror effect, so we all will see our reflection in James Jackson. Thank you all for coming.